Hi, I'm Joshua Ponsafo of the New African Concept. I believe strongly that you've been blessed so far with the various episodes of the Voice of Reformation. And I'm very much excited to inform you that with the next 3 months ahead, February, March, and then April, there is a special package in the area of apologetics. I know you have several questions on your mind, and so do I. For the month of February, we'll be considering the subject area of the Bible. So questions like, is the Bible truly the Word of God, or it is just a figment of human beings? And that how did we even arrive at getting our Bible today? Are there various versions of the Bible? And how did we even get that? And are they the same? Are they similar? Or they are different? In the month of March, we'll also be looking at the subject of black skepticism. I believe you've heard and seen that there is a new wave that is called the woke or black consciousness, the new form of Pan-Africanism, where they are hitting strongly that for Africa to advance, we must do away with everything called religion, particularly the Christian faith. Was Christianity carved by the white man in order to rule or manipulate the black man? Is it true that we have the Bible and in several churches doing the biddings of the white man? Is it even true that Christianity impedes growth or otherwise? Join me this and every Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. on the Voice of Reformation as we look at these subjects. We have able facilitators, the likes of Elder Emmanuel Emisa, Pastor Jacob Honey, Pastor Patrick, Mark Edubuating, and then Kafuite. The good thing is also that the last Friday of every month, you get an opportunity to join in by bringing on board your questions so that we ask them for serious interactions. I believe that with all these interactions, the ultimate goal is that Ghana and by extension Africa will be liberated and saved. See ya.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another exciting and insightful edition of the Voice of Reformation. My name is Richard Donfe, and I'm a sitting host for your regular Reverend Dr. Joshua Oponsafo. As you might well be aware of, we have been tackling certain issues that bother on apologetics and the defense of our faith since the month of February. And it is in light of that we come to your way this evening with yet another session that bothers on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I only think it's just timely that we have this discussion now. Joining me for this evening's discussion is my own brother Kafuite, who will be handling a couple of questions that are bothering the minds of a lot of Christians and non-Christians. And even in the course of our discussion, you can leave your questions in the comment section. When we are done airing all the series, we will attend to all these questions. So feel free, if you have a question, if you have a comment, just leave them there. If it is a comment, somebody might read and understand the topic better. If it's a question, when the time elapses, we will address all those questions as well. All right. And also feel free to share the link with your friends and family and anybody you want this session to be a blessing to. We go straight into the session, and I hope you enjoy it. So this episode will focus on the significance of the resurrection and the sequence of events on the resurrection day. So Kafu, good evening and welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you too for honoring our invitation and for availing yourself to have this discussion with us. So there's been a lot said about the resurrection of Christ, especially when it comes to the Christian faith. But why do you think that all the fuss about the resurrection is so necessary?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and it really speaks to the course. The discussion that we want to have today. So really, the resurrection of Jesus is one of the most important tenets of the Christian faith. It speaks to the core of what we believe as Christians. There are several reasons that I will try and perhaps raise why the resurrection is one of the most important topics that we want to look at. First of all, the resurrection of Jesus, like I said, is the central part of our faith. It forms the foundation of our faith, and everything in Christianity, really boils down to the resurrection of Jesus. So, and then also adding on to it, the point is that for me, the resurrection speaks to genuinely the questions of life. When we talk about the questions of life, we are talking about things around where do we come from, for instance, the question of origin, the question of why are we here, purpose, the question of morality, how do we differentiate good and evil, and the question of destination, where do we move or where do we go from here. So these are philosophical questions that have been debated over the centuries, and I think the resurrection paints a clear picture and tries to provide us with answers to those questions. But let me just point out a few things. So first of all, the resurrection is a very proof that Jesus gave to us. When he was questioned, the Pharisees approached Jesus and they asked him to show them a sign, and Jesus actually pointed to the sign of the resurrection. He actually rebuked them by saying and telling them that an evil and adulterous generation always seeks signs, and that there's only one sign that will be given to them, which is the sign of Jonah. And as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, the Son of Man, or the Son of God, is also going to be, he will die, and then after 3 days he is going to resurrect. So Jesus gave that sign. In another instance, when he was asked again, he told them that he was going to destroy the temple in 3 days, and then he's going to rebuild it. And that, the commentary on it in the scripture is that the people didn't even understand that he was talking about himself. So it's something that Jesus himself, gave us a sign to prove his claims. And what are some of those claims? The claims of Jesus include, his deity, the fact that he claimed to be the Son of God. And then he claimed to have the same authority as God has, in that he was able to, forgive sins, for instance, which, his audience at the time interpreted clearly and directly as equating himself to God. So Jesus claimed his deity. The fact that he also came to save mankind, and all the teachings that, Jesus taught the people around him. Everything, and anybody can get up and make all of those claims and give things that are not verifiable. But the sign that Jesus gave to support his claims is the fact that he will die, and when he died, he will rise up, because God will raise him up on the 3rd day. And so that's the first thing, that the resurrection actually supports the claims that Jesus made about himself. And that is what we Christians or believers actually, our faith is built on. Secondly, it speaks to the fact that, there's an afterlife. If Jesus died and then he resurrected, contrary to the views of other worldviews that claim that all that there is a physical life, and that once you die, that's it. The death and resurrection of Jesus actually points out to the fact that there is an afterlife, and that it doesn't end when one dies. After death, there's something else. There's a spiritual realm as well. Then lastly, there are several points. I just want to, for the sake of time, just dwell on these. But lastly, I want to also mention that if Jesus died and he resurrected, it means that our salvation is secured. In that Jesus claimed that he was going to die for us and to die for our sins. If that sacrifice is accepted by God and really it's able to pay, the price for our sins, then it is the reason why he had to, rise again, to really prove that that sacrifice was accepted by God. And so that is something that is secured. The resurrection again is very significant in that it gives us hope as believers that upon everything that is happening on this earth, there is hope for us that one day when we die, we are also going to be raised back to life, just as Jesus Christ was raised back to life. I would want to end here, but the point is the resurrection is so central. It forms the central theme of even the preaching and the message of the disciples and the early church.
All right. So thank you very much. But listening to you, you made a point that one of the main essence of the resurrection is to establish the deity of Christ. But then it happens that it's quite interesting that the very thing that is supposed to verify a claim of Jesus is now being doubted due to certain circumstances surrounding the whole process. So there are a lot of issues that critics have raised surrounding the resurrection as to how many women saw Jesus when he arose, the sequence of events that happened, the number of angels, whether the tombstone was rolled before or after his resurrection. All these questions have come up, and it puts even the mind of Christians at some level of unrest. So how do you deal with all these stories? I mean, is there a way we can verify and understand all the things that happened leading to his resurrection and after his resurrection?
Yeah, so I think you've nailed it. The fact that we have in the Bible the 4 gospel accounts of the resurrection. It's actually
sorry.
So yeah, the 4 gospels all report the events that happened on the day of the resurrection. What we now call the Easter Sunday. So, and interestingly, that is one of the points that critics are raising, that the story as and the accounts as recorded in the Gospels don't sort of yes, there are some discrepancies or there are some differences in the accounts. So the first point I would make is the fact that that's very point that is being raised, that there are differences in the accounts in the gospel. It's actually evidence to the fact that these people really, did not sit down at one place to come up with stories. Because if they had sat down and planned this, they would have come up with the same story. And in fact, in the law courts, when witnesses or evidence is being adduced from witnesses, the fact that different witnesses that saw the same event come up with different some slight differences in their accounts really speaks to the fact that what they are saying really is what happened. And therefore what happens is that you try to piece all of the pieces of accounts together so that you get the full picture. You've ever heard of the story of the blind man that went to see the elephant?
Tell me.
Yeah, so there's this Indian story about some blind men that went to see the elephant, and depending on which part of the elephant they touched, so the one that touched the leg of the elephant said the elephant is like a tree. The one that touched the ear said that the elephant is like a farm. You understand? The one that touched, the trunk also came up with, said that the elephant is like a wall. So what in effect is happening is that they are all looking at the same thing and they are feeling it. And depending on the angle that you were standing, you say what you saw. For anyone to come up with a full picture, you have to piece everything that they've said together to get the full picture. It's the same thing when it comes to the gospel accounts. If an accident happens here, depending on where you are standing, you will tell us what you saw. It might be different from what the other person might say, but when all is pieced together, you get the full story. So that's the first thing I would want to say. The 4 gospels were written over different time, spans. They were not written at the same time, and they had different target audience that they were, speaking to. So each and every one of them tells the story from a perspective, and when you piece them together, you get, the story. So that would be my general response. Maybe we can look at the specific differences.
Exactly. So that is where I'm going. So let us condense the stories together and make meaning out of it.
Great.
So it's just like the story of your blind man seeing the elephants. So I believe that as a Christian, you have also looked at the Gospels. You've read a lot of research work that has gone into it. So if you want to put the elephant together, all the different parts, to make a bigger view of the elephant for all of us, you want to know the sequence of events that happened, stories that we can actually corroborate. So I want to start off with, when did the woman go to the tomb, and then how many were they?
Okay. Yeah. So I think the time as to when the women visited the tomb is not so difficult to resolve. If you read the book of Matthew 28:1. So I'll start with so it mentions that Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to the tomb as it began to dawn. So that's what Matthew said. Mark 16:1-2 says that. So Mark actually adds Salome to the group. So Mark then builds on, Mark mentions Mary Magdalene and then the other Mary, and then he mentions Salome. So I'm trying to answer the question as to how many women and then what time they went there. Then Luke 24:1, and then also when you read the verse 10, it says that early in the morning, and the names that he mentions is Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women. Then John 20:1 mentions Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early while it was still dark. So you notice that we are not getting the same number of names being mentioned in the different accounts. However, none of the accounts mentions that one woman went. Just one woman actually went to the tomb. Neither does it say 2 women went to the tomb. The fact that I mentioned Mary's name and I mentioned another person's name does not mean that just those 2 people visited the tomb. So on the issue of the time, you notice that they are mentioning, at least it's very clear from everything that has been read, that the women went there early in the morning.
All right.
In fact, Mark, Luke, and Matthew all point to that fact. The difference is in John's account, where John says that it was still dark. And that is also very reconcilable, in that where the woman came from, which we presume to be Bethany, to where Jesus was buried, which was in Jerusalem, there's a distance. So it's possible that in John's account, he was talking about when the women were setting off, which was still dark, versus the other 3 accounts which speak to the fact that when they got there, it was early in the morning. I don't know if it's clear.
It answers the question, but okay. You finish.
Yeah. So that's it. The issue about the time is not difficult to solve, because it's clear that we are all talking around the same time frame which is early in the morning. Then on the question of the number of women who went to see the tomb, it's clear when you pieced all the accounts together that we are looking at least 5 women.
Okay.
At least 5 women. I'll mention the names. So we have Mary Magdalene, we have Mary, the mother of James, we have Salome, we have Joanna.
Okay.
Then, in fact, there's another thing that's mentioned, that also mentions Mary, the other Mary. So at least there are 5 people that we are looking at here. And when you look at the other accounts that I read, some actually mention that Mary and the other women. So it doesn't really limit it to the fact that there were just 2 women, you know, as John puts it. John only mentions Mary Magdalene, and there's a reason. We will come to that. And maybe I'll address that issue. Why in John's account he's only mentioning Mary Magdalene. But the fact is that none of the versions or none of the accounts actually just says 1 woman or 2 women. They mention their names, and when you piece them together, you get to see that there is no discrepancy in terms of the number of women that went to visit, you know, the tomb.
Okay, so I'm thinking, quite interesting. You are talking, all these events happen on a Sunday morning, right? And why women specifically? And he dies on Friday. Nobody goes to the tomb on Saturday, and you wait until Sunday morning when you go there. Anything could have happened on the Saturday, and why are we talking all about women being the first people to go chance upon the resurrection?
Okay, so that's also a very interesting question. The fact is that, and there's some debate also around the exact day that Jesus was crucified. We know that, yes, we celebrate Easter on Friday. That's a story or a topic that we can discuss another time. But the fact is, the Saturday, as we are talking about, was the Sabbath.
Okay.
So even if you read the account of John, he mentions it quite clearly. And I don't want to go into the details of that, but the fact is that Saturday was the Sabbath. They could not, and you know how the Jews observe the Sabbath. They couldn't go there on the Saturday. And of course, it's the duty of the woman to go, and because Jesus was crucified and they hurriedly buried him, they couldn't have the enough time to, you know, spice and treat the body according to the customs of the Jews. So the next opportunity that they had, or the next available day that they could go, was definitely the Sunday.
All right.
And so they had to quickly, you know, make time and go there at dawn to try and, you know, anoint the body, treat the body as it's supposed to be treated. So that's the answer to that.
And talking about these women again, was the tomb already opened? Okay. And how many angels appeared? Because I'm thinking every lay person's mind will be like, this is a heavy stone rolled on the doorway. So how did these women get to unroll the stone? And even when they were going there, were they trusting so much in their strength to roll it over, or it was already opened? I mean, the story surrounding the tomb being opened and the number of angels that appeared, can you also help clarify that for us? Okay,
so on the issue or the question of when was the stone rolled, in all the accounts, if you look at Mark's account, you look at Luke's account, they categorically state that when the women went, they were thinking, how are we going to get the stone rolled away? But actually, when they got there, they noticed that the stone had been rolled away. It's Matthew's account that gives us the details of how the stone was rolled away. In that, although Matthew had mentioned that the women set out to go, and it's like I'm telling you a story, and then in the middle of a story, I try to recount what happened before the woman gets there. So people are saying that, you know, if you read it just literally, it looks like Matthew was saying, you know, the woman witnessed the angel move, but that is not the meaning. If you read it with, you know, sound judgment, and you read it with clear thought, you get to know that he is trying to take you back to tell you what happened before the women got there. So Matthew says that there was an earthquake, an angel appeared and then moved the stone, and the people upon the soldiers that were, or the guards that were guarding the tomb, upon seeing the angel, trembled and they fainted like dead men. So that is it. That's how the fact is that it was rolled away. The focus of the Gospels was on the fact that when the woman got there, the stone had been pushed away. It was rolled away. And there's a lot of analysis and scholarly work that has been done on it to say that, it would require a lot of strength and effort to pull that the women could not definitely, be the ones rolling away the stone. On the question of the angels, again, none of the accounts, especially if you look at the Matthew and then you look at Mark's account, they just mention an angel, and they don't say there was only one angel at the tomb. They don't just say one angel actually. That would have been categorical. They mention that an angel. Then Luke and John mention two angels. So in both instances, definitely the angels didn't speak. The two angels never spoke at the same time.
Of course.
So when they say an angel, spoke to or appeared to the woman, it's very simple. The fact that Mark and Matthew never said just one angel appeared to the woman, and so we can safely conclude that two angels actually were present, depending on the angle that you saw it, and depending on what report that was given. Of course, it wasn't just one woman. So if we were five and one sees one angel, that person will go and report to the disciple. I saw the other person also who goes to report may report that, because that's what they saw, and that all feeds into the credibility of the story, that this was not something that was planned, this was not something that was concocted, this is something actually that happened, just as we all narrate events based on our perspectives.
Great. So upon the resurrection of Jesus, he revealed himself to a lot of people, and still centering our focus for this discussion on the woman. We would want to understand, they've gone to the tomb, he's not there, the angel has given them the information, he is arisen. So in the sequence of events, when and where did each of these women see Jesus?
Okay, I think it's interesting. So what I'll try to do is, based on all that we've discussed, I'll try to piece all the information that we've discussed together, and then try to paint a picture. So the point is that women, and we've said at least 5 of them, set out to go and to the tomb and to anoint Jesus' body and to treat it with spices and all of that. So that is clear. They set off to go and see him. So when they went, or on their way going, they get to the place and they see that the tomb, the stone had been rolled away. And so they try to look at what is happening, and they were disturbed. How did the stone get rolled away and all of that? So they went in to see what had happened. At that point, Mary Magdalene ran back. So Mary Magdalene ran back to Peter and then to John, who were in a different place from the other disciples. So, because if you recount the story of the crucifixion, there was a scatter.
They were scattered, yeah.
Yeah, so, but John and Peter were in Jerusalem. You'll notice that John actually was present at the scene. And so John and Peter were at the same place. The women had come from Bethany to Jerusalem to come and anoint the body. So when they got there, Mary Magdalene seeing this, left the woman there and went to report to Peter and John. Whilst she had left, the women that were there went inside the tomb. So at the first instance, Mary Magdalene didn't even see the angel. The women went inside and they saw that the thing was empty. Then the angel or the angels appeared to them and told them why are they looking for, the living among the dead and all of that. And that they should. And so they also decided to go back. They were going back to the other disciples, not to Peter and to John. It would have been good if you had the graphics. There's a simple picture that illustrates it. So Mary Magdalene goes to tell John and Peter. They ran back to the tomb, and they also come upon getting to the place. They notice the stone is rolled away, the tomb is empty, and then they looked and did whatever the examinations that they had to do. Looked at the the folded cloth and all of that, and then they went back. Mary Magdalene stayed back. If you look at John's account, Mary Magdalene stayed back, and when Mary Magdalene stayed back, she saw the angels. They spoke to her, and then while she was still there, worried about his, her Lord, the Bible makes it, and the account is quite clear on it, that she saw another person, and she thought that person was a gardener. They're saying, they have taken my Lord away and all of that. Then that was Jesus. Jesus then mentions Mary's name and says, Mary. And Jesus, at that time Mary couldn't reckon because, and that also speaks to it, that the people themselves were not even expecting that Jesus would resurrect. So then Mary, upon hearing that, her mind is drawn to it, and she mentions Jesus' name and said, Rabboni, meaning teacher. So then she could recognize. And then Jesus tells her to go and tell the disciples that, he's risen and all of that, and that you meet them in Galilee. So then Mary goes back. Whilst the other women were on their way, because the other women had also left, going to see the other disciples, Jesus appeared to them. So the first appearance is to Mary Magdalene. Then he appears to the other women and gives them the same message. You should go and tell them, you will meet them in Galilee and all of that. Then Jesus, the Bible records it that there were two disciples who were on the road to Emmaus. Jesus appeared again to those people as well. And whilst they were speaking, he, rebuked them, of course, that they ought to have known that he was going to resurrect, because they couldn't even recognize him until suddenly their eyes were opened and they could see him. Then again, so it's not clear whether, so Jesus again appeared to Peter and John as well. But it's not clear whether that happened before the appearance on the road to Emmaus or not. But there's also another appearance, that is Jesus appearing to Peter and then to John as well. Then Jesus again appears to the other 8 disciples. And then he appears again when all of them were together. Thomas wasn't there. Subsequently, when Thomas came, he also got to experience a risen Jesus. So in summary, there is no discrepancy. If you look at it and you put everything together, you will actually see that when you read the stories, they give more details, and then you are able to see the full picture quite clearly.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much. So I would want you to round this up. Okay. I would want you to quickly summarize the Resurrection Day events. You've led us through, I think you've shared more on the women's activities, but then we want to put everything together now. So if you could just summarize everything that happened on the Resurrection Day, and then we can draw the curtain on this evening's discussion.
Great. So like I've already stated, first the women set out to go, that's on the Resurrection Day, which is Sunday. They set out to go early in the morning to go and, spice the body and treat the body according to the Jewish customs. There were more than one women, at least. We can count about 5. That is at least. So there were more women. They went to the tomb. When they got there, they noticed that the stone that had been put at the entrance of the tomb had been rolled away. Then Mary Magdalene goes back to tell Peter and John. The other women stay. They enter the tomb, notice that the tomb is empty. They notice that, at least the body wasn't there. Then the angels appeared to them. They saw the angel. The angel spoke to them and told them not to be afraid and all of that. They also decide to go back to go and inform the other disciples. Mary Magdalene returns with John and Peter to come and see what she saw. They enter, they notice that the tomb is indeed empty, and that, the cloth that was wrapped around Jesus is neatly folded. That's a very important point, and all of that. Then they go back. Upon going back, they see Mary Magdalene stays back. Mary Magdalene, sees the angel, speaks to them. Then she sees Jesus. Jesus appears to her. She speaks to Jesus. And then she goes back. Jesus then appears to the other women who are also on their way to go and speak to the other disciples. Jesus appears to the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. Jesus appears to Peter and John. And then he appears to the other disciples in the absence of Thomas. And Thomas comes, he also sees Jesus as well. In fact, the Bible in 1 Corinthians 15 makes it clear that Jesus appeared to about 500 people at once, at least. And so that speaks to the general events around the day of the resurrection. And there is no discrepancy. Once you sit down carefully to look at it and analyze it, you will come to, and you go with an open mind, you will come to the conclusion that we are coming to. And there is no difference, there is no discrepancy. In fact, it speaks to the credibility of the gospel accounts, that these accounts were independently written, and it wasn't like they sat down to concord and come up with these stories so that they were speaking the same language. But just like we witness in any event, when people witness an event, different people see it from different perspectives, and it is not normal that people should speak the same, tell the same storyline. That would really speak to the fact that these people actually sat down and concorded. And the evidence as a seen, when put in any court, you will notice that the witnesses the witnesses account of the witnesses that we observe in the scriptures or in the gospel accounts is credible and can meet any standard of proof.
All right. But just before we finally end the session, I remember you telling us when we were answering some of the issues I raised about why Mary Magdalene, because she seems an interesting figure who is appearing even in all the gospels, almost all the gospels, regarding the resurrection of Jesus. So
just to speak to it again, that the credibility of the stories, you notice that in John's account, John only mentions Mary Magdalene, which is obvious, because it was Mary Magdalene alone that went to tell to tell Peter and John that I went to and in fact, when you read the account, you will notice that that also buttresses the point. It wasn't Mary Magdalene alone, but from John's perspective,
of course,
it was Mary Magdalene that came to tell. And in his account, when Mary is brought, he said that when we went there.
Okay.
So then it clearly speaks to the fact that John is telling us what happened or what he witnessed, which was the fact that it was Mary Magdalene that came. So it's not surprising that in his account he only mentions Mary Magdalene's name. Okay. Because it was Mary Magdalene that came to. And I think that is also enough proof to support that these stories are independent, based on the perspective and the angle with which they saw or witnessed the events.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much, Kafui. And we look forward to another exciting session with you when next we meet. And thank you all for listening and being a part of this evening's session. We've been able to understand the significance of the resurrection and, of course, the sequence of events that followed. Stay tuned and please join us again in our next session, even as we delve into deeper truths and revelations regarding the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Have a wonderful evening and enjoy your rest of your day. Thank you.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Hi, I'm Joshua Ponsafo of the New African Concept. I believe strongly that you've been blessed so far with the various episodes of the Voice of Reformation. And I'm very much excited to inform you that with the next 3 months ahead, February, March, and then April, there is a special package in the area of apologetics. I know you have several questions on your mind, and so do I. For the month of February, we'll be considering the subject area of the Bible. So questions like, is the Bible truly the Word of God, or it is just a figment of human beings? And that, how did we even arrive at getting our Bible today? There are various versions of the Bible, and how did we even get that? And are they the same? Are they similar? Or they are different? In the month of March, we'll also be looking at the subject of black skepticism. I believe you've heard and seen that there is a new wave that is called the woke or black consciousness, the new form of Pan-Africanism, where they are hitting strongly that for Africa to advance, we must do away with everything called religion, particularly the Christian faith. Was Christianity carved by the white man in order to rule or manipulate the black man? Is it true that we have the Bible and in several churches doing the biddings of the white man? Is it even true that Christianity impedes growth or otherwise? Join me this and every Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. on the Voice of Reformation as we look at these subjects. We have able facilitators, the likes of Elder Emmanuel Emisa, Pastor Jacob Honey, Pastor Patrick, Mark Edubuating, and then Kafui Tay. The good thing is also that the last Friday of every month, you get an opportunity to join in by bringing on board your questions so that we ask them for serious interactions. I believe that with all these interactions, the ultimate goal is that Ghana and by extension Africa will be liberated and saved. See ya.